someone had been holding on to a painful truth in silence for much longer than anyone knew. A truth so powerful that the moment it was finally spoken, it changed everything. A wedding planned for months suddenly came to a complete halt. The smiles on everyone's faces faded away. Questions hung heavy in the air. Then one unexpected decision left every single person in the room utterly speechless. Listen carefully. Don't skip. There are moments in life when just one sentence can alter the course of destiny. This was one of those moments. For a long time, you thought your story had been forgotten. You convinced yourself that the people who left would never return. But while you were trying to move on, someone else was quietly searching for answers. Deep in their heart, they never felt whole. Every celebration felt empty. Every promise seemed incomplete because one lingering question followed them everywhere. Was there someone I was never meant to lose? As the wedding day approached, family members were celebrating, invitations had been sent, and everything looked perfect from the outside. Yet the person at the center of it all couldn't understand why their heart wouldn't find peace. Every night they found themselves thinking about a face they could never truly forget. Every attempt to push those memories away only made them stronger. People around them called it pre-wedding nerves. Others said it was fear of commitment. But the truth ran much deeper than anyone imagined. Then, on the very morning when everything was supposed to become final, an elderly family member quietly entered the room carrying something hidden for years. At first, no one noticed. The house was filled with excitement and laughter. Music played in the background, but the entire atmosphere shifted the second that person spoke. I can't stay silent any longer. The room fell completely quiet. Every eye turned toward them. What they revealed wasn't gossip or rumor. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was one undeniable truth, and it was connected to you. Don't skip. They explained how someone had once given up everything, believing your happiness was more important than their own. They revealed that promises had been broken behind closed doors, not because love had faded, but because others had interfered. Decisions were manipulated. Conversations were hidden. Letters never reached their destination. Feelings were buried under family pressure until everyone believed the chapter was closed. The person about to get married stood frozen. Every word felt like another missing piece of the puzzle finally clicking into place. For years, they had blamed themselves. For years, they thought you had simply walked away. But now, for the first time, they realized nothing was as they had been told. A heavy silence filled the room. No one knew what to say. Even the relatives who had always defended the old choices looked down in shame. The person took a slow breath and quietly asked the question everyone feared. If this is true, then why was I never told? No one answered. Because everyone already knew the reason. The silence itself was the confession. And in that unforgettable moment, just as the ceremony was about to begin, they slowly stood up, looked at everyone gathered, and said words no one expected. The room fell deathly silent. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. The person who had been moments away from saying I do stepped back, hands trembling, eyes moving from face to face. Every smile that had filled the room just minutes earlier had vanished. The joyful music now felt distant and meaningless. Their heart was racing, not from fear, but because years of unanswered questions had finally found their reason. "Tell me everything," they said softly. Their voice carried no anger, only deep pain. Years of confusion had finally reached its breaking point. The elderly family member took a deep breath and began unfolding the story everyone else had tried so hard to bury. They spoke of the days when your name was said with hope instead of silence. They described how real feelings were dismissed, how false stories were allowed to spread, and how one decision by others slowly pulled two people apart who never wanted to be separated. "Don't skip." Every sentence landed heavier than the last. Several relatives lowered their heads. Some quietly wiped away tears. Others couldn't even look at the person standing there. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. The person preparing for marriage began remembering little moments that had never made sense before. A phone call that ended abruptly. A message left unanswered. A meeting mysteriously canceled. A promise that simply disappeared. For years they believed you had chosen to leave. Now they understood that someone else had chosen for both of them. Their breathing grew heavier. "I blamed the wrong person." Those words echoed through the room. The future spouse standing nearby watched in shock. They had never seen this side of the person they were about to marry. The confidence and excitement were gone. In their place stood someone overwhelmed by regret and long-buried memories. One relative finally admitted, "We thought time would heal everything." Another whispered, "We believed it was the right decision, but it never brought real happiness." Years had passed, yet the emptiness had remained. The person slowly removed the wedding ring they had been holding, not in anger, but because their heart refused to make a lifelong promise while carrying so many unanswered questions. "Don't skip." "I can't go through with this today," they said calmly. The words spread through the room like a shockwave. Some guests gasped. Others covered their mouths in disbelief. No one had expected the wedding to stop. But deep down, everyone knew the decision had been made the moment the truth came out. The person turned back to the elderly family member. "There's only one thing I need to know now. Where's the person whose life was affected by all of this?" The room fell silent again. Several people exchanged nervous glances. Then another family member stood up from the back and said, "Before anyone tells you where they are, there's one final truth about you that has never been revealed." Every face turned. And once again, everything changed. The person who had refused to marry stepped forward. "What do you mean?" The family member looked around the room and spoke. For years, everyone only knew one side of the story. But the greatest sacrifice was never told. The person everyone had blamed was actually protecting someone else. A wave of confusion swept through the room. "Don't skip." The family member opened an old envelope that had stayed sealed for years. Inside were handwritten pages carefully preserved. "I was told never to show these," they admitted, "but after today, I can't hide the truth anymore." The handwriting was unmistakable. The letter explained that you had discovered a secret that could have destroyed several families. Instead of exposing it, you quietly stepped away, believing your own heartbreak was a smaller price to pay than letting others suffer. You never defended yourself. You never asked for credit. You simply disappeared, letting everyone believe the worst. The room fell silent once more. Several relatives could no longer hold back their tears. One elderly woman whispered, "We judged the wrong person all these years." The person at the altar closed their eyes. Every painful memory now looked completely different. The unanswered messages, the sudden silence, the unexplained distance, none of it happened because you stopped caring. It happened because you chose to protect everyone else. "I spent years thinking I had been abandoned," they whispered. "But the truth is, I was the one who never understood." Don't skip. Regret filled the entire room. One by one, family members admitted their mistakes. Some confessed they had believed lies without questioning them. Others admitted they stayed silent out of fear of upsetting the family. Then the final page of the letter was opened. There was one last request written there. The letter said, "If the truth ever comes out, don't look for blame. Don't seek revenge. Don't punish the mistakes of the past. Simply choose honesty from this day forward." That's all I ever wanted. No one could speak. The person who had stopped the wedding gently held the letter to their heart. "I don't deserve this kind of forgiveness," they said softly. Just then, a phone on the nearby table began to ring. The elderly family member looked at the screen, tears in their eyes. "This call is from someone who knows exactly where you are." The room held its breath as the phone kept ringing. Finally, they answered. After a pause, they handed the phone over. "I think this is for you. Don't skip." The voice on the other end was calm. "I've waited a long time for this day." The person instantly recognized it. The caller revealed that you had never hated them, never forgotten them, and never stopped hoping the truth would one day reach them. Tears filled their eyes as the caller continued sharing how you had been remembered through all the important moments. Before making any more decisions, the caller said there was something they needed to see. A small wooden box that had been kept safe for years was brought out. Inside were old photographs, a journal, letters, and one sealed envelope. A tiny photograph slipped out, and what was written on the back left everyone speechless. "One day, the truth will return, even if it arrives years late. Don't skip." The letter inside carried only kindness, forgiveness, and hope. It asked them not to live with regret anymore. The person folded the letter and looked around. "For years I searched in the wrong places. But now I know what I have to do. I have to find you." No one tried to stop them. The truth deserved one last chance. Following the clues in the box, the journey began. After many emotional stops and revelations along the way, they finally reached the place at sunrise. There, standing quietly, was the person they had been searching for all these years. No dramatic words. No anger. Just tears and long overdue understanding. They looked at each other, realizing that while time had changed them, the truth in their hearts had never faded. One smiled through the tears and said, "I thought destiny had forgotten us." The other replied softly, "No, destiny was just waiting for the truth." The families who had followed watched with tears, understanding that honesty and forgiveness were far more important than any past mistakes. Months later, everyone gathered again, not for a wedding built on secrets, but to celebrate a new beginning built on truth. And as the celebration ended, an elderly family member whispered to the sky, "The truth may come late, but it never comes too late." For the first time in many years, every heart finally found peace. In the days that followed, the world felt different for both of them. The heavy weight they had carried for years slowly began to lift, replaced by a quiet kind of healing they never thought possible. They didn't rush into anything. Instead, they spent long hours talking, sometimes until the sun came up, gently unpacking the pain, the misunderstandings, and the lost time. There were tears, but there was also laughter. Real laughter. The kind that comes when two hearts finally feel safe again. They walked along the same lake where they had reunited, revisiting old memories without the shadow of regret hanging over them. Places they once visited together now held new meaning. What used to hurt now brought comfort. The families, too, began their own process of healing. The elderly relatives who had stayed silent for so long asked for forgiveness, not expecting it, but receiving it anyway. Slowly, the walls that had been built between everyone started to come down. Meals were shared again. Stories were told honestly. Old wounds were acknowledged instead of hidden. Months turned into seasons. One quiet evening, as golden light poured through the windows, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. No grand gestures. No dramatic declarations. Just two people who had found their way back to each other. "I never stopped loving you," one whispered. "I just didn't know how to carry it anymore." The other smiled softly, taking their hand. "And I never stopped waiting, even when I tried to convince myself I had." They didn't need to erase the past. They simply chose to build something new on top of it, something stronger, more honest, and more beautiful because of everything they had overcome. A year later, in the same peaceful hill overlooking the lake where their second chance began, they stood together once more. This time there were no secrets. No hidden truths. No family pressure. Only pure, chosen love surrounded by the people who had learned to support them. The wedding was simple, intimate, and full of meaning. Tears were shed again, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. The elderly family member who had first spoken the truth stood proudly, watching the two people they had helped bring back together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in warm hues, one of them looked at the other and said, "We finally made it." The reply came with a gentle smile, "No, we didn't just make it. We earned it." And from that day forward, they lived with a deeper appreciation for truth, for second chances, and for never letting fear or silence steal what truly matters. Their story became a quiet reminder to everyone who knew it, that even when years are lost, love that is real can still find its way home. The truth had arrived late, but it had arrived exactly when it needed to. Years passed, but their love didn't fade, it grew deeper and quieter, like an old river that had finally found its true path. They built a life together filled with the small, beautiful things they had once taken for granted. Morning coffee shared in comfortable silence. Walks in the rain. Late-night conversations where they spoke about their dreams, their fears, and the lessons the painful years had taught them. They didn't pretend the past didn't exist. Instead, they honored it by refusing to let it control their future. The families that had once been divided slowly became one. Gatherings that used to feel tense and formal now overflowed with warmth and laughter. The children born into the family grew up hearing the story, not as a secret, but as a powerful lesson about the cost of silence and the healing power of truth. There were still hard days, of course. Moments when old wounds ached or when they remembered the time they had lost. But on those days, they held each other a little tighter and reminded one another, we found our way back once. We can face anything together. One crisp autumn evening, many years later, they returned to that same peaceful hill by the lake. The place where everything had changed. They sat on the grass as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The person who had once stopped their own wedding looked out over the water and said softly, "Sometimes I still can't believe we got here." Their partner smiled and rested their head on their shoulder. "I used to think love was about never getting hurt. Now I know it's about choosing each other even after the hurt." They sat in peaceful silence for a while, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Then, almost at the same moment, they both whispered the same words they had carried in their hearts for so long. "Thank you for never giving up on us." As the night settled around them, they felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for finding each other again, but for the journey that had shaped them into people capable of deeper love, greater forgiveness, and stronger trust. Their story continued not as a fairy tale, but as something even more powerful, a real, honest, beautifully imperfect life built on truth. And every once in a while, when someone in the family faced a difficult choice or was tempted to stay silent, they would share pieces of this story and gently remind them. The truth may arrive late, but it never arrives too late. Time moved gently forward, as it always does. Their hair slowly turned silver, their steps became a little slower, but the light in their eyes whenever they looked at each other never dimmed. They had lived a full life, not without challenges, but rich with love, laughter, forgiveness, and the kind of quiet strength that only comes from having walked through darkness and found each other on the other side. One quiet summer afternoon, many decades later, they returned once more to the peaceful hill overlooking the lake. It had become their sacred place, the witness to their pain, their reunion, and now, their farewell. They sat together on the same spot where they had stood years earlier, hands intertwined. The lake shimmered under the golden sunlight, just as it had on that fateful morning. The one who had once stopped the wedding turned to their partner with a soft, peaceful smile and whispered, "If I could go back and change one thing, I wouldn't. Because every tear, every lonely night, and every unanswered question brought me back to you." Their partner gently rested their forehead against theirs, eyes shining with tears of gratitude. "We lost so many years," they said, "but we gained something even more precious, a love that was tested by fire and came out unbreakable." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of pink and gold, they held each other close. No more words were needed. In that moment, everything they had been through felt worth it. Years later, when their time on earth came to an end, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate two lives that had become legend in the family. They didn't speak of the pain. They spoke of the courage. They didn't dwell on the years that were lost. They celebrated the love that refused to die. And at the end of the gathering, the youngest grandchild stood up and read the words that had been passed down through the generations. The truth may arrive late, but it never arrives too late. As the family looked out over the lake where it all began, they felt a deep sense of peace. Two souls who had been separated by silence had found their way back through honesty, forgiveness, and unwavering love. And somewhere beyond the golden sunset, two hearts that had waited years for each other were finally together, forever free, forever whole, and forever at peace. Their story had ended the way every true love story should, not with perfection, but with truth, healing, and a love that even time could not destroy.